Welcome to this explainer. All right, let's jump right in, because we're looking at a rapidly unfolding, incredibly high-stakes situation recently reported by CBS News. Right now, literally as we speak, we are witnessing a massive high-stakes race. On one side, rapid U.S. military preparations for a fresh round of strikes. On the exact opposite side, intense, behind-the-scenes back-channel diplomacy with Iran. It's a true dual-track scenario, and honestly, the very next move could either secure peace or ignite a massive escalation. We've distilled all the latest reporting to help you understand exactly what's going down, why the clock is ticking, and what this all means for the rest of the world. So let's get into it.
Now just take a look at the stark contrast between the two extreme realities playing out at the exact same time. On one hand, you've got President Trump openly stating that, quote, Iran is dying to make a deal, which obviously suggests a huge appetite for a diplomatic resolution. But then right across from that, literally at the same time, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is issuing some truly stark public warnings. They're promising, quote, crushing blows in places you cannot even imagine if the US or Israel launch further strikes. They're basically threatening to widen the conflict way beyond the Middle East. It is a wild juxtaposition, right? You have diplomatic optimism colliding head-on with dire military threats.
To help make sense of this incredibly fast-moving situation, here's our roadmap. First, the immediate threat. Second, the diplomatic final offer. Third, the economic and strategic stakes. And finally, the ticking clock.
All right, starting with part one, the immediate threat and how both sides are preparing for conflict.
This really hits the nail on the head when it comes to illustrating the administration's dual-track approach. Over on the left, you've got very real, tangible military preparations, literally gearing up for a potential war. But look over on the right and you see highly active diplomatic efforts, like transmitting proposals through intermediaries, trying to negotiate peace. The administration is balancing on an absolute knife's edge here. They want to ensure that if the diplomacy on the right completely fails, the military machinery on the left is locked, loaded, and ready to go at a moment's notice.
Let's dig into what those military preparations actually entail because, well, some major personal and operational sacrifices are currently underway. This really shows just how seriously the threat of imminent military strikes is being taken. Get this. President Trump actually canceled his planned Memorial Day weekend trip to his New Jersey golf property. He cited circumstances pertaining to government, headed back to the White House, and even missed his son Donald Trump Jr.'s wedding. At the same time, members of the U.S. military and the intelligence community have abruptly had their holiday leave canceled. And on an operational level, defense and intel officials are actively updating recall rosters for U.S. installations overseas. They're doing this just as tranches of troops stationed in the Middle East rotate out of theater, which, by the way, is a very deliberate effort to reduce the American military footprint in the region just in case Iran decides to retaliate.
So what's absolutely crucial to understand here is that the White House has drawn some incredibly firm red lines. A White House spokesperson made it crystal clear what conditions would actually trigger severe consequences from the commander-in-chief. Number one, Iran can never possess a nuclear weapon, period. And number two, they cannot keep their enriched uranium. The Pentagon's entire job right now is to be 100% ready to execute any decision the president makes, should Iran fail to agree to a deal that honors these specific red lines.
Moving right along to Section 2, the diplomatic final offer, and the fascinating back channel making it happen. Okay, so this timeline traces exactly how we ended up on this precipice. Since early April, the US and Iran have basically held off on striking each other. That temporary ceasefire bought some much-needed time for indirect talks on a longer-term deal. But wow, did things accelerate quickly this week. On Wednesday, the US transmitted a brand new proposal, which was met almost immediately with those intense IRGC warnings of escalation we talked about earlier. Then by Friday, President Trump was speaking publicly about Iran wanting a deal, even as news of canceled military leave and updated recall rosters started leaking to the press. It just highlights how incredibly fragile this entire situation is, literally day by day.
Let's zoom in on that Wednesday transmission for a second. This definitely wasn't just your standard run-of-the-mill negotiation document. According to sources, this proposal came explicitly with a severe warning attached. It was framed as the final offer. Tehran is currently reviewing the proposal, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Reject these terms, the temporary ceasefire is over, and military strikes will resume. I mean, it's the ultimate ultimatum.
Now, you might be sitting there wondering, how on earth do two countries with zero direct diplomatic relations negotiate a final offer while standing on the brink of war? Well, the answer is Pakistan. Specifically, Secretary of State Marco Rubio mentioned right before a flight to India that the U.S. expects to receive Tehran's response through a Pakistani field marshal. This specific individual has really stepped up to become the primary conduit of communication, essentially acting as the vital middleman for the Trump administration.
Let's broaden our view for Section 3, the economic and strategic stakes, and look at the global impact.
Remember, this conflict was actively raging for 3 full months before this recent temporary pause. And in geopolitical terms, 3 months is a very long time. It's more than enough time to cause massive, echoing disruptions across the entire globe.
So what does that global disruption actually look like for you and me? Well, the ongoing uncertainty from this 3-month clash has completely rattled international energy markets. And you know how it goes. When energy markets get spooked, the effects trickle down straight to the consumer. This conflict has directly driven up fuel prices worldwide. If this situation remains unresolved, or worse, if it escalates back into actual kinetic strikes, the economic toll is going to land heavily on everyday people everywhere. Right at the absolute center of all this economic tension is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a crucial global waterway. Actually, think of it as a vital choke point for the entire world's oil shipments. Iran's recent decision to impose tolls in the strait has completely disrupted the free flow of commerce. And honestly, that's just a non-starter for the US and its allies. The tension in this specific waterway is so incredibly high that it's prompted serious high-level discussions about forceful intervention.
In fact, because of this massive economic threat, Secretary of State Marco Rubio revealed a military Plan B during some recent meetings with NATO allies in Sweden. This plan directly maps out how to reopen the Strait of Hormuz using combined military force if Iran simply refuses to do it themselves. Now, Rubio did note that President Trump vastly prefers diplomacy to strikes and that some progress has definitely been made. But the very existence and coordination of this Plan B proves that allied military action is waiting right in the wings.
Which brings us to our final section, the ticking clock, and how time is rapidly running out.
The U.S. has very explicitly put Tehran on the clock. President Trump stated flat out that he was prepared to give Tehran just a couple of days to respond to the latest U.S. offer. And while he did mention his team was, quote, pretty impressed by Iran's negotiators, he strongly cautioned that the administration is going to need some highly substantial assurances to keep this conflict from reigniting. A couple of days. That is the incredibly tight, high-pressure time frame separating the tense peace we have right now from potential missile strikes.
Meanwhile, as that literal clock is ticking down, the domestic political hurdles for the president back home, they're practically vanishing. Over in Washington, House Republicans have totally abandoned an effort to hold a vote that would have limited President Trump's authority to conduct military operations against Iran. They basically crunched the numbers and realized they just lacked the votes needed to stop the resolution from advancing. What this means on a purely practical level is that the commander-in-chief now has a completely clear domestic runway to launch strikes if that final diplomatic offer gets rejected.
So with military strikes fully prepped, personnel recalled, NATO allies briefed on Plan B, and a final, ultimatum-style diplomatic offer sitting on a desk in Tehran, we are left with one massive lingering question. When the clock runs out on these couple of days, will the back-channel diplomacy through Pakistan actually hold up? Or are we about to witness the immediate resumption of a devastating war? The pieces are all on the board, and the very next move is going to change everything. Thanks so much for watching this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on that ticking clock.